Hello and welcome to the HFA Webinar, Family Offices, Facts and Myths. I'm Mitch Ackles, the president of the Hedge Fund Association. The HFA is a global nonprofit industry, trade, and nonpartisan lobbying organization. Our mission is to advance transparency, education, and trust in alternative investments. If you're not already an HFA member, please consider joining today at hedgefundassoc.org. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Camille Homsey, the chair of HFA's Family Office Committee, for putting together today's program, and our webinar sponsor, Archie Investments, a private placements advisory firm focused on connecting family offices and other sophisticated investors with alternative investment products. We also want to thank HFA's annual thought leader sponsors, UMB Fund Services and Citrin Cooperman. Now it's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today's HFA program, Mark Sharp, the founder and chairman of TFOA, the Family Office Association. Please take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Mitch. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Welcome to the Hedge Fund Association Family Office Webinar. I'm Mark Sharp, founder and chairman of TFOA, the Family Office Association. I have the honor and privilege to serve as the moderator of our panel today with two very distinguished speakers. Patricia Homsey, Managing Director of Columbia Business School's Global Family Enterprise Program, and Camille Homsey, founder and CEO of the GRC Investment Group in Dubai. Today, we'll begin by discussing some family office facts and myths. I'd like to start by asking our two panelists to introduce themselves. Camille first, please, and then Patricia.
Good morning and hello, everyone. Camille Homsey, GRC Investment Group. We are a single family office from United Arab Emirates. Our main offices are in the city of Dubai. We focus on global investments and on alternatives in specific. We are heavyweight in commercial real estate, investing in renewable energy, waste management, medical device, fintech, and also other smaller buckets that we add as the trend of the market require. As a co-founder, I head the several groups, which is the global allocation, the optimization, and the state of the global portfolio. But at the same time, I have an affinity for years for maintaining governance and also leading the mentoring program that lead to a successful succession. We do have an overarching policy on ESG, where since 2014, every investment I signed a check for made sure that the managers or the partners, because we do direct and we do co-investment, have a focus and full understanding of ESG, the implementation, the monitoring during the holding period and the exit, and not only during the opening or the inception of the fund or the partnership. Therefore, it is a must for me. I do have some exclusions on certain investments and certain sectors that we do not invest in for ethical and for internal policy requirement. I'm happy to be here. Patricia and Mark, you are valuable, and I'm looking forward to a great panel.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, and I'm also delighted to be here. I think we're going to have some fun talking about a topic that I think about day and night and have been doing so for the 30+ years of my career. The Hedge Fund Association is a place I might have ended up if I had stayed on the path of being a lawyer doing the corporate documents for some of the now largest hedge funds in the world. But I actually jumped over to the other side and really was intrigued by working with families, working with principals, and working with multi-generational wealth. So since the mid to late 90s, I've focused exclusively on families who own businesses, trusts, and foundations that cross generations and often cross borders. Because I didn't have enough going on in my day job, I decided to also found a program up at Columbia Business School. So I still consult to a number of families around the world. And then now up at Columbia, we have a handful of MBA courses for all graduate students to help them understand family ownership, because it is, in my view, along with climate change, the most important issue of our time in terms of the consolidation of wealth within a small number of families. So understanding that is critical for MBAs, for their careers, for their personal lives, and for their professional satisfaction. So I obviously have some passion about the issue, and I'm delighted to be here to talk to the two of you.
Wonderful, I appreciate that. I'm just going to give a quick backstory on the Family Office Association for folks who don't know about TFOA. So I founded the TFOA in 14 years ago now. At the time I was CIO for a large multi-generational family office in Houston, Texas, and was really looking for a pure peer network for myself of like-minded folks who weren't trying to sell me anything. One of the challenges of being in that seat is you are pitched to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That might help folks understand my perspective on a lot of the issues around family office. So we were just looking for folks where we could share ideas, best practice, ask questions, deal flow, co-invest in a safe environment. Turns out there aren't a lot of places to do that, and so the Family Office Association has kind of grown through word of mouth now over the last 14 years. The good news is it's a great network of peers who are buy-side single families only to be eligible for membership. The bad news is you can't make a business out of that. As soon as you try to monetize it, the family offices run. So it's a passion project for me. It's a labor of love. It's something I do, but obviously a lot of value in those relationships and a lot of pay it forward. But we'll get more into family office groups that are out there that folks in the audience might be speaking to, and the pros and cons and things to be aware of. I've written a few white papers on a lot of the issues around family offices, which you can find at the website tfoa.com. So with that background, we're going to jump into some very basic questions, because there is a lot of confusion, I think, around nomenclature and other, just basic terms of what is a family office. And Patricia, I think you would be a wonderful person to kick us off. If you can tell us what is a family office and how is it structured, please.
So Mark, I now understand that Camille has ceded all of the rest of the time for our panel today, because if we're going to talk about what is a family office, that will take us at least an hour, if not longer. But since I know he has some wisdom and insights, I will not take up all the time answering your question. I will try to give some ideas on something that everybody loves saying. You've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. There is a phrase that one of my alums at Columbia said that I thought captured a family office the best. And he said, family offices are where a family's emotional life meets its financial life. And I thought that was really interesting, because a family is primarily an emotional system, and what it owns and what it operates, a lot of what we're going to talk about today has financial components to it. But what you have to think about is there's an organization and some structure around what a family needs to manage, own, and operate over time and across generations. So you can think about it in multiple ways, and I recommend anybody on the call to be thinking about for themselves, what are the metrics of what is a family office? The term doesn't matter as much as the characteristics of what has to be done. So who owns it matters. So you could have a single family office that's owned by a family. You could have a multifamily office that's a commercial provider, maybe owned by professionals, or you could have a family office section of a financial institution. So it could be owned in different ways, but that has major implications for what it does. What it does and who it serves are members of a family who have needs across a whole spectrum of tax, estate planning, risk management, cybersecurity, lifestyle management, and investments in financial planning. So in all of that, you have to figure out what's the purpose of the family office. And that's where we go back to the different frames. A single family office, the purpose is to serve that family's needs across all of those spectrums. a large financial institution that has a family office department, its purpose is to make money serving those clients. And whether, it's really pretty simple. People try to make this much more complicated. And so I recommend people here to think about, does it even matter whether it's called a family office? And think about what is it that it's doing and what is its primary purpose. And then you'll know better how to engage with it. Family offices can be embedded in an original operating business. They can be standalone entities, or as I've said, they can be housed in a larger financial institution. So sorry, that is a broad-ranging answer. I recommend that everybody focus on the activities as opposed to the label.
That's great. We're going to dig in more to that. It's a great framework. Thank you for sharing. Camille, perhaps you can share a little bit about your family office and how it's set up and operates.
Definitely, when I brought in the early 90s, I mean, in my previous life, I was in consumer goods manufacturing, definitely part of my family, and lived for a period of time in Hong Kong, and learned a lot about the structure of family offices from my English colleagues and from being in England, in France, in Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, where there is a large concentration at the time of family office financial structures. When I brought in the concept to my family in the GCC countries, and actually we were in Kuwait, the first question was, who's going to be the boss? I said, well, there's no need to be the boss. You don't need to, you can continue picking the brides for your sons and the husbands for your daughters and decide who takes what, who drives who, but let's leave the investment to a body or a group. And being a boss is a rotational, and we will have a quorum, and, started just talking about the structure. It took me a few years to really aggregate our holdings in Europe at the time, because at the boom of the oil industry, most of the wealth was managed directly by the English wealth managers. And English wealth managers, they are known for the following, and I have said this even in London several times. They only recommend England and they only recommend London. If you tell them 1 mile away, to go to Liverpool or to go to Southampton or elsewhere, no, it has to be London and the business and the commercial district of London. Our second generation, due to education, and became more sophisticated and more demanding. And at that point, I was able really to bring collectively the concept of governance to the family. Now, this is for our family, which thank God today is one of the leading families in wealth and operations, not only because I'm among the ones who lead it, but because we are preparing also the second and the generation to succeed us and the one even after that. And for that, again, we need, like Patricia said, we need a whole day to talk about the different models. We know that every family is a silo by itself, but in general, we can categorize them maybe in 3 to 5 general categories. And then from there, we can explain them further, not only to the wealth managers, to the emerging managers, even to the veteran managers, but also to anyone who wants to approach from the entry level, advanced level, be able to engage in interviews and understand the structure. To structure a family office is simple, but do you need a family office? Are you in a position to run your own independent family office? Are you under financial expense constraints that you feel you're spending a lot of money for the 220 and you do not have a say? You are not getting the proper transparency. Reporting, or the company or the wealth manager you work with is not advanced in technology. You do not have access to a private portal. If I am in Dubai and you are in New York, in Atlanta or Los Angeles, do I have to wait for you for the time you are awake, which will be my time to be in bed, to get into to get to an answer for a question, or I can electronically log into my account and find my answer right there, or maybe plenty of answers. My accountants can do the same. So all these facilities today are important. There is a lot of do's and do not do for our listeners when they approach family offices. Let me start by saying this. Do not use cold calls. It will work against you. Make sure and try to be introduced. When you are introduced, you have credibility. When you are introduced, propose a call or propose Zoom or propose a meeting, depends on the circumstance. Sit down and don't be a car salesman. Don't be Al Bundy. Do not go there to sell shoes and to sell cars. Go there to open a relationship. A family office is normally duly invested during the year. There is some liquidity for an opportunity, but they also have commitments because they cannot leave dry powder, sit on it, and expect that there will be a distribution for the members at the end of the fiscal year. So don't rush into getting a check. And we had these situations with some of the leading icons of the States and England and Germany when they sat with me on panels on Abu Dhabi or in Dubai or in Kuwait and say, Camille, how do you do it? I say, well, I'm from here. I speak the language. They know me. It is not 45 minutes on a panel and someone is going to write me a $50 million check and say, Camille, please, I beg you, invest my money in America. That's not going to happen. So there is a lot to be considered when you engage with the family. And try to do the full research. And don't expect to sit with the patriarch or the matriarch from the first meeting. You will sit with the CFO and maybe with the son or daughter or second or third generation, and just to have a conversation, just to make your services clear. And try before you leave that you propose or plan for a second meeting. And don't let this elapse for several months and several weeks, where when you come back, you have to start going through the pleasantries and the small talk one more time. You come back with the plan and you come back offering services. Remember, they are all already committed. They do have wealth managers. They work with some of your competing experts. So, but don't forget, in family offices, just like in every family, there is death, there is divorce, there is inter-family conflicts, and then there is a change of investment model and desires. So all those four events create a situation where second generation, after the death of the father or the grandfather, say, you know what, we never liked the law firm. Now we want to work with a new one. We never liked our CFO. Now we want a new one. We do not, we want to change some of our service providers. So the opportunities are there. And just because of natural progression of the family growth. More to talk about this, but with all fairness, I will stop here waiting for more questions.
No, I appreciate it, Camille. You jumped straight into sort of the issue of how to access the family office world and how to build those relationships with what is a very opaque and often below the radar community. Let me just remind folks in the audience to submit questions if you have them. We'll look at those as they come in. But the initial point of identifying them in the first place is sort of where we started here. And we'll come back to accessing them in terms of differentiating between a family office group within a Wall Street wealth management firm and a multifamily office. And I differentiate between a closed multifamily office and an open multifamily office. The distinction being that one is really actively soliciting for new clients, is in effect an RIA, perhaps with a worse business model, because not only are they providing the wealth management services for a fee, but they have to do all of the other family office services as well, possibly not for extra compensation. And the closed multifamily office is really very akin to a single family office, but serving a couple of families, but not soliciting for more business. So those are sort of the major definitions around family office. The Wall Street firms and the RIAs who are open are very easy to access, but the question is, what is the hedge fund community looking for from that community. In terms of the single family office or the closed multifamily office, that's really where we'll focus our conversation. So, you know, maybe Patricia and Camille, share how you built your networks in those worlds, and how you advise, I mean, you've given some sense, Camille, but how you advise folks to go about building their networks and relationships. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll just throw it open as a question. Patricia.
So yeah, it's so interesting. How do you build your networks in this area? I think of family offices the way I used to think of hedge funds, and rather than calling hedge funds an asset class, which I don't believe it is, I called it an access class. Because certainly in the early days of the hedge funds, it was very much an inner circle of relationships. And as a young lawyer, I could see the spin-offs of, say, oil industry people, or this was even free technology, where there was an inner network, and that was the initial funding, and then the families and friends would go on from there. So access was critical. In family offices, I would say that that was true 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It was an inner circle. Nobody wanted anybody to know that they existed. I was involved in a lot of the early organizations that would bring families together to learn together about investing, about governance, about structuring, about family dynamics, all of the issues that you need to think about on the family principles side. I don't think it's as closed a world as it was 20 or 30 years ago. And I think now we have a greater differentiation across family offices. So what you have to figure out is, if you're trying to get access, what are you really trying to get access to? So some service providers, lawyers, want to get access to the family office, right? So do they want to get access to do the corporate planning for their investment vehicles? Well, then you probably have to know the family principal, or maybe there's a legal counsel. If you're an investor, like many of the people on this call, and you're trying to get access to assets to invest, then I would differentiate between small family offices that are primarily service organizations to the family, not focused on investing, versus large professional with organized investment areas. Those are going to be much better to get access to, because you're going to get what you want from them. And I think today, I was just looking at some numbers from what we've done at Columbia, just looking at this, 70 or so % of the family offices that seem to exist in the world, which may be 7,000 or 8,000, maybe more, most of them were founded in the last 10 or 20 years. The ones that were founded in the last 10 or 20 years were primarily hedge fund owners, founders, spinning off their own family office, primarily China and Asian families who have accelerated across the emerging market boom there. The technology boom out on the West Coast of the US. There you have big pools of capital with, frankly, young families who actually don't have as much of a liquidity need for their investments. So they have a longer growth plan, and they probably have people for you to talk to who are the CIO or maybe the investment committee. So if you're trying to get access, I would recommend on the investment side to look more at the newer, larger investment pools with an organized professional structure. Because the large multi-generational family offices may have investments as a big component of what they're doing, but they probably have embedded relationships already, so it's going to be harder to break in, and they have multiple needs that they need to meet now. They need to fund the foundation. They need to finance 150 family members. They have liquidity issues, and they may have relationships with outside investment consultants already. So if I were going to look for access as an investor, I would go for larger, newer, with professional investment teams. And that's growing fast.
Yeah. Camille, what do you think?
I am a network person. I believe in relationships, as I said earlier, and for the audience, I say family offices need you as much as you need them, because for family offices, you are our eyes. You are the extra experience that we do not have. You know, if I, for example, if someone come to me and say, Camille, I want to explain to you an investment on oil and gas. I chuckle. I say to him, you know what? Every piece of skin in my body was financed by oil and gas. So how much you going to tell me that I do not know, and we are on top of it? Okay. Now come in with experience. Again, come in with the style. In reference to how do you uncover family offices, I encourage those who have an interest in this space, look into either getting memberships into organizations that service the space, or also invest into attending events where family office members are attracted to attend. And there are many of them. We don't need to mention them. You know, just in your field of business, you can uncover several. Do not depend again on buying a database. Those 7 or 8 or 10,000 families that have been created since the RIA, the hedge funds today, the space is family office for many different reasons. For operational reasons, and also, I mean, for quantitative as well as for qualitative. So it is a patient capital trip. It is a marathon, as we all say in the sports field, in the sports. It is not a sprint. I would say if you focus on the space and you build the road on networking, you will find your niche. And then pick your families. Like for me, I just said before what I invest in. If someone come to me and say, Camille, would you invest in a cannabis? I say, well, 10 minutes ago, I said what I invest in. I didn't say cannabis. I don't invest in firearms. I do not invest in tobacco. And for the obvious reasons, I do not invest in pork. And I make this clear in every forum when I have the microphone. And then you have someone else that says to me, Camille, I'll make you a billionaire if you invest in this cannabis. I say, you know what, this is the wrong approach, because I didn't come here to become a billionaire. Somebody else did that already. I came here for capital preservation. I came here for growth. I came here to ensure similar or better future for the children, the grandchildren, and for those who are not even conceived, let alone born. In the future, to have an opportunity to travel, to be safe, to be educated, to run the family, and then later on to become our elderly, that we also put great emphasis on their lifestyle, on how they're going to grow, how they're going to be, how will they be administered their medicine or their medical needs, and how they will be secured.
Mark, can I jump in a sec? Because I just want everybody to know how rare it is for a family member like Camille to be so clear on what they really want and what they're focused on. And what I find out there is the myth, which may be your next question, Mark, on what are some of the myths out there. But what I find is that people in the investment side, especially hedge funds, say, that person has a lot of money, therefore they should invest in what I have to offer. And I find a lot of wasted time thinking that just because somebody has the money and is even the owner, they are the one who's going to write the check to you. And it's also, I had a student a couple of years ago from McKinsey or Bain, wherever, and he said, well, all we have to do is go straight to the decision maker, and that's how we're going to get things done. And I said, if you can figure out the decision maker in a family, good luck. So there are lots of decision makers who you will never meet, who are in the back. They may be ghosts of generations ago. So I would recommend that you find families with members like Camille who are very clear on what they're looking for, or who have professionals who are already the front line. Otherwise, you might be having nice conversations year after year with people who may never pull the trigger for you.
It's a great point and very well said. And I think, we are talking about facts and myths of family offices here, and one of the facts, unfortunately, is it's really hard. No one is going to come away from this webinar with the magic bullet. It's hard work. It takes a lot of time, effort, energy, insight to build those relationships, to figure out who the decision makers are, to figure out who has veto. And, every family office is different. So at one end of the spectrum, the sale can be very much like a retail sale. You find one decision maker, you pitch them on the golf course, and they give you money. The other end of that spectrum is committees and approvals and layers, and as Patricia said, maybe there's something in a trust way back when that says they can or can't do something, and you just may never know that. So it's very much a spectrum of retail sale to institutional sale, depending on the family office and how they're set up, and it's really hard work. So that's the unfortunate fact, I think, of how you can access family offices and pitch to them. Let's move on to some other myths and facts. I think one of the other potential most important things about the interest in family offices is because they do have the ability sometimes to be patient capital. What are the thoughts from the panelists on the competitive advantage that family offices might have in being patient capital, or the practical, just how patient are they? I'll throw it open, whoever wants to take it first.
I tell you what, one of the advantages that I have exercised for years, and I'm known among secondary brokers, there are always deals where other families have a sliver of a trophy asset, if it is a manufacturing company or it is a building in Shore Lake Drive in Chicago or Fifth Avenue in New York. And there are changes in their family. And those changes, they always fit into those four I mentioned before: death, divorce, interfamily conflict, or a change of complete investment approach due to whatever reasons or a trend. So family offices having that pool of capital or that discretionary pool of capital that is always on a standby for an opportunity always gave me an advantage in negotiating a secondary. So that you will find among families that are, I would say, well established and secured in AUM. This might not be an opportunity for families that range from 75 million to 300-400 million, because when those are more fully invested with less liquidity until there is an exit. But for families that are more financially equipped, that could be a great advantage. Another advantage for the family is that on a smaller family, the decision maker could still be the same breadwinner who's still alive, the mother or the father, or one of them or both. So that also gives them an advantage for a bit faster decision. But more established families that have already established governance and a quorum of an investment committee, that require a little bit more of time, regardless if they were national, meaning if they were American, or if they were European, Middle Eastern, or Asians. Definitely, there is always consideration for holidays and consideration for time zone and the responsiveness of a family. But again, part of being a successful family and also well managing the time and relationships, that should also be cleared. Before COVID, I was at the Marriott Marquis, Central Park South. I was invited to the podium and they asked me, what makes you different? I said, I am not different when I am here, because in our case, we maintain offshore capital and onshore capital. This is something for the hedge fund manager to know also and to ask. One way or another, during the initial conversations at inception, are your investments all offshore? Or it is onshore, in our case, it is a combination because we maintain both sources. I promised them to give them an answer, especially on a secondary, to give them an answer within the week. But I also asked them to cut me some slack on time, on the time zone, because when I am overseas, I am 9 or 10 or 12 hours ahead of them or behind them. And at the same time, local holidays, for example, in our part of the world, our holiday is Friday. Here in America, your holiday is Sunday. In between, you, especially New Yorkers, half of the day of Friday, they do not work. By us, 3/4 of Thursday, they do not work. And the Friday is off. And then they say, okay, let's take it lightly on Sunday for the expats, because most of them come from Europe and other countries that recognize Sunday as a holiday. And now, after all the peace talk, all the peace agreements, now we have to also recognize Saturday for our friends who celebrate Saturday. So imagine that our week over there is only 4 days, if not 3.5. So to have considerations when you're working with foreign investors. But in general, you will see that based on what you are offering, the response from the family will be commensurate with what you offered. If you offer me what I focus on, you will get a faster answer. And now, also in my case, because I sit on the advisory board of other families in the region and elsewhere, including here, they do not invest in what I invest, but they know I have an experience in the space. So I would give an advice, but my advice is not the final decision. So people approach me. I'm going to close by just alerting the audience to the following. If a investment committee rejects your offer, do not go around to one of the members and offer him or her that investment on individual basis. You will lose credibility for a lifetime, because that's not ethical. If you know that I am on the investment committee and I liked your investment and I took it to my committee, but my committee, due to vote, they rejected the investment. Don't come back to me and offer it to me, because then I know that you are not a stand-up person. So that's something that I would say really from the heart, because it might not be written in books, but it is exercised. It is not a good practice.
Thank you for sharing that, Camille. Patricia, the pros and cons of being patient capital in a family office, what are your thoughts of that?
The pros and cons of?
Still on the subject of patient capital, I'll open up to the cons.
Yeah.
I think there are definitely pros. Maybe you can share those and cons as well for how family offices allocate.
You know, I loved when I first learned the concept of patient capital in families, because I was a trust lawyer at the time and advising families, and a lot of what we were creating was going to last forever, last 100 years, or had already been in existence for 50 or 60 years. So I really found that families who saw their capital that was multi-generationally oriented and wasn't needed in each generation, that they had the bandwidth to think about patient capital. I think it's changing a bit right now. And I'm going to throw out a couple things. I think millennials are a little bit more interested in inpatient capital, and that they want their capital aligned with their values and they want it to do something now. So you think about charitable foundations, which have traditionally had the notion that it will be perpetual and that a certain percentage will go every year and it will go on forever. Younger people are too impatient for that. And I think we're going to be seeing a trend towards, on the charitable side, more spend down, spend out currently. And then on the capital side, the financial capital side, I think the patient capital is becoming a little bit of schizophrenic capital. So that you have a pool which is oriented towards the long term, and honestly it probably depends on what structure it's held in. Is it held in a trust that has a professional manager that's looking at it for the long run, and does it have an investment committee and all of the governance that Camille was talking about, or not? And so you may have a big pool today that isn't yet structured that could look like patient capital in 10 years once it's gotten structured, but before then it may be a lot more fluid along the way. You know, the pro of patient capital is that families have been funding, you know, the majority of the private equity and venture capital, and they can do the capital infrastructure that you really need if you genuinely care about ESG. I think that pure commercial private equity people don't have the patience for that. And any family that is truly committed to having an impact with their investment can put the larger amounts of capital in today and hang on longer. So I think that's a pro of it. The con, I would say it's not necessarily a con, it's more knowing about what structures it's held in. And I think sometimes people will look at, for example, oh, that's $1 billion family. I hear that's $1 billion family office. That's where I'm going to go because they have a $1 billion pool. And then if you actually work for one of those, and I've been in several multifamily offices in the financial world, you could have a $1 billion family that has most of its accounts of 5 million or lower because it has a number of trusts that have all spun out to the second, third, and fourth generation. And those little pools of capital are being spent on tuition today. They're being spent on buying houses. They're for younger age groups. So knowing how the capital is held in a family office and how multi-generational it is and how structured it is will make a big difference with how patient that capital will be, I would say.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people trying to access the family office community have some preconceived notions that are probably wrong. You know, they're not necessarily unsophisticated. Oftentimes they're very sophisticated. They don't necessarily have tons of liquidity lying around. Oftentimes it's all allocated, or it's in trusts, or it's hard to access, or other things. And you know, it may be patient capital, but it may not be patient capital. It just depends on the family and what they're looking to do. I think that's why it's attracting a lot of attention right now. Is it is perceived as sort of easy money sometimes, but that is a myth we should probably dispel on this call. Any other myths that you can think of around sort of secrecy and motives and the size of family offices that you want to share with the audience, Camille?
Definitely, I like to say to everyone listening that today, for a family office or otherwise, it is not about the survival of the fittest. It is about adaptability. We're living today, since March 20th of last year, or maybe a couple of weeks earlier, under a new paradigm. It's all about adaptability. So even patient capital for me meant something different up to that date. Because definitely I'm like you, like everyone listening, and that all their investors, I like to capitalize on opportunity. And it doesn't take a genius to remember from school the relationship between volatility and opportunity. So there is a lot of volatility, economic, financial. I mean, today we're looking at, you know, and we criticize a lot of the policies. We agree with some policies. We know fiscal policy has an impact. We know that the United States and Europe, they exercise their modern monetary policy where they printed a lot of money due to being the reserve currency or the fiat of the world. And that will have an impact. And that impact will create volatility. Today, finally, in the last few weeks, I hear economists admitting that there is inflation in the developed world, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And also there is a lot of deficiency in the third world, as today we have, according to the United Nations, 70 countries that did not get any type of vaccine yet, from China, from Russia, from Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson, AstraZeneca, anybody, nothing. And also many countries in the world, their rating has been downgraded, and I don't know why, by our 3 rating agencies last March. So that made it even more difficult for them to service their debt, to borrow more. and to be able to protect their subjects. And now they don't have vaccine. So all that will have ripple effect on the world economy. And that brings us back to your point. We need to have liquidity and also capitalize on those opportunities. So would I commit today loosely to a 10 years fund? No. Would I lend on real estate? Because, you know, as foreign investors, we do have in the tax code a provision that will give us the opportunity not to pay capital gain on that money, that we invest in real estate, providing we are not a bank. That to be discussed again in the future. Would I lend for 30 years? No. I will lend between 2 to 5 years maximum. Depends on what is the asset, where is it located. While before COVID, my definition of patient capital, Mark, was a lot different.
Wonderful. No, thank you for that. Patricia, let's touch finish off on myths and then go to a question from someone in the audience.
Last thoughts on that. Yeah. So there are some myths out there that are really important for this group to focus on. One is the myth that if you are a wealthy family, your primary goal is to increase your financial assets. And in fact, the leading families, and I've been a part of the group that has changed the way that people think about wealth for the last 20 or 30 years. They're thinking about their human beings. They're thinking about the human capital side of the equation far more than they're thinking about the financial capital. Financial capital to them is a commodity, but they're realizing that if you don't have healthy human beings in a healthy world, then all the financial didn't do them all that much. So understanding as an investment manager, advisor, whatever you are, know what your client's objectives are will really help you. I have seen far too many investment people come up to families and say, I can make you a ton of money. And the family is saying, I have a ton of money. I'm worried about my family. And that's where, you know, I come in on the governance side and on the family side and get to hear them saying, you know, if only people would listen to me. So that's part of it. There's also another two things that go together. Transparency is going to be the future. We can't assume secrecy. So the Pandora Papers, I may look bleary-eyed because I'm reading every night about it. The world that I started out in, which was the multinational trust structuring world for families, you cannot assume that you're going to be able to rely on bank secrecy any longer. It's just not going to happen. And so who are you in the world, and what of your family's information will be on the front screen, as opposed to what we used to call the front page, is really important. And what does that mean about your role in the community? And I think the inequality issues that we're dealing with and the consolidation of wealth is going to put a lot of pressure on the role of the families we're talking about who are of the magnitude of having a family office and the financial capital and how it's being deployed. Just some thoughts.
No, those are some great thoughts.
Mark, may I add just to this point also, I fully agree with Patricia. I add that cybersecurity for me today is maybe on top of my list of concern when I wake up in the morning. And then personal security. You know, more wealth in the world, more poverty created, okay? Maybe, I have concerns about where our youngsters get educated, who do they hang out with, who are the vultures that try to sell them everything that you and I, our parents, do not permit or agree or wish. And then cybersecurity is very important because today, as we all living in a virtual and in the digital world, the last thing that I do not hear many concerned about, and definitely Patricia also alluded to that, which is the elderly members of my family, those who retired. They are top concern for me because definitely we are not going to send our elderly to the senior housing facilities. We're gonna keep them in the house for many reasons, not only for their emotional needs, that's very important, but also for our need to constantly learn from their experience and to hear their wisdom. My grandfather cannot walk, but he can talk. My grandmother, she cannot cook, but she can tell me a lot about how she raised my dad and my uncles and everybody else. So who do we hire to administer their daily life and their medical needs? Now, in our houses, there are collectibles. In our houses, there are conversations that we like it to be private. Onboarding is a specialty by itself. And we go through a lot of process of elimination before we hire, because again, we hire for life. I would love to see the nurse that is attending to my mom staying with us and outliving my mom, you know, because definitely she is a lot younger. So the last thing I say, we also focus on writing wills, okay, and also on appointing a proxy for our wills. So if someone come in and say, well, you can put your other brother too. No, that's not a good legal advice. Health proxy should be one person, you know, because now there are critical moments where you don't need 2-3 people fighting over making a decision that might impact the life or death of a person. The next thing is to have a living will for our elderly. As they retire, they want to go spend 6 months in Monaco, live in a yacht, or live in one of our assets in London. But anything could happen. We all believe in lucky is the man who has a tomorrow. Who has a tomorrow guaranteed tomorrow? I don't. So the last thing I say, you should always have a good power of attorney. So I'm encouraging attorneys, I'm encouraging estate planners, tax planners, and cybersecurity companies to reach out, because it's not always about, as again, one more time, Patricia said, that it's not always about getting wealthier. It is about also a lifestyle and the maintenance. I always say, I don't want to be a president of the country because I will not be able to take a bicycle and, you know, next to my grandson. You know, then because if I were the president, I need so many bodyguards maybe and Secret Service and all that stuff. I want to live also a life like everybody else. So if people are going to bombard us with offerings, knocking on the door, cold calls, a lot of email of offering items that we already cleared ourselves, and that's what I encourage colleagues in this space. I say, make yourself clear. If you only do real estate, say to the world, I do real estate. What's wrong with that? If you want to do cannabis, go do cannabis. You want to get rich on it, that's fine. You know, and if you want to do coal, or you want to do renewable energy, lithium, liquid hydrogen, whatever you choose, make it clear. And that this way you do not inundate your email and your staffing with offerings that they do not fit. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. We got a few minutes left. The time has gone quickly. Just to segue into a question from the audience, and there may be some hedge fund managers out there who are considering closing the fund to LPs and setting up a family office. So with the time we have left, what would an aspiring family office founder consider when moving forward? Patricia, help us understand what those initial thoughts should be and how they should go about it.
Sure. I am working with a couple families right now who are in exactly that phase. And so, boy, do you want to own a wealth management firm that is your own? That's what a family office genuinely is, if you're really going to have it over time. Are you qualified to manage it yourself? Probably not. Do you want to set up the structure legally, which has all of the compliance issues and all of the audit issues and the cybersecurity issues? And how will it be owned? Will you own it? In the US, I'm a big fan of purpose trusts, which is the latest trend in having a family office owned by a purpose trust as opposed to being owned by individuals, so that when someone dies, you don't have to then leave it to someone else. The purpose of the purpose trust is to own the family office over time, so you have a more sustainable vehicle to own it. So how will it be owned? How will it be governed? Families often think about they're going to become the investment manager for themselves. Why not think of yourself as becoming the board of the family office, so that your best skill has to be how to hire, oversee, and monitor whoever you've hired underneath there. Governance needs the board. Will you have an investment committee or not? And how much do you want to put into this? I've seen too many people come into New York who set up family offices with beautiful offices and beautiful artwork and a whole bunch of very expensive people. And within 5 years, they realized we didn't really need this. So why are we doing it? How much can you do virtually? A heck of a lot more than you could before. Technology is getting there. There are more investment consultants now than existed before. So if I were a founder, I would look really hard at what the costs are, how I'm going to govern it. Do I genuinely have a family that needs a family office? How am I going to hire the people to do it? And is this an entity I want to sustain over time? That's just a few of the things.
No, that's great. Let me ask you one quick direct question. What would the first hire look like?
Oh God, that all depends. That is exactly the conversation I had yesterday with a client. And that will depend on the source of the funding and what the office is there to do. Okay, if you are going to need primarily tax and estate planning and the investments are held elsewhere, you better hire an accountant or somebody with that background. If you already have a whole number of trusts in the family, or you're going to be structuring across generations, you better get somebody with trusts and estates as a background. And if you're going to be primarily looking for somebody who can oversee all of your outside investors, then you need the investment background. If you could get all three of those in one person, that could be your best first hire. And if you can find that person, give me a call, because it's very hard to find somebody with that level of professional expertise who will take the risk to work for a family who the next day might decide, oh, we don't want this anymore. So get a good package if you're going to get hired in for that job.
Camille, I think we have 1 minute. If you were starting your office today, what would you do?
Definitely, I will look for a nanny for my grandchildren, a cleaning company that will come clean the house once a week, and the driver who is deaf mute. He will not listen to my phone conversations and don't know what I am doing. There is a lot to say about how, the daily activities, but definitely adaptability, also engaging our what we call junior gen, and I have them in different tiers. And I do not give them all the credit for making the changes. I also demand from them to engage and to explain to their respective fathers or uncles, or when they sit down with me, even if I know about a space, when they tell me, we want to do away with fossil fuel. That's a great idea. Tell me why and tell me how, and give me scalability at the end, because money does not grow on trees. At the end of the day, you could be Einstein, come up with the theory of relativity, and then die, and then wait until Neil Armstrong had it among his team, and NASA, that led to walking on the moon. So it takes time to understand it and to implement it. So tell me, how are you going to do away with fossil fuel? So there is a double duty on both of us. For us, the older, to understand them, to open the door for them, to listen to them, and also for them to come with conviction and with knowledge and data to convince us, because we are the older tree and they are the more flexible, younger trainee. And probably the last thing I want to say thank you to Mark, thank you to Patricia, and thank you to HFA, to Mitch, and to Jamil for inviting us. This has been really a very, very nice hour spent.
Thank you, Camille. Patricia, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening in. I believe the recording will be available, and I hope you enjoyed it, and hope everyone learned something today. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.